What's up, fantasy managers? I want to talk about the big guys up front because they should be able to eat their cake too. The offensive line is important for your fantasy players to score points. I have the offensive line report for week 15 that you should know about. I know you're interested, so stick around for 7 seconds. This information can help you decide your own fantasy tiebreakers, who to start or who to sit. By understanding who has the advantage in the trenches will give you the advantage over your league mates. I have 3 players you want to target. I have 3 players you want to avoid in week 15. All this information is on PFF. I subscribe to it, so you don't have to, but I will relay the information to you, starting with my notes right now. And let's kick things off with the first game, and we're going to look into the Denver Broncos offensive line versus the Colts defensive line. The Broncos offensive line ranks first in pass blocking grade at 84.2, after allowing just a 14.9% pressure rate on the year, which also ranks as the best in the league. Colts defensive line, while still solid, still ranks only average with a 69.0 pass rush grade, that's 15th overall, while it's still 30.1% pressure rate, just ranks 26. The Broncos offensive line had been on this plenty of times during the season because they are one of the best offensive lines when protecting their quarterback, and that's what we're going to aim again. It's Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a player who's been playing very well, and it's because his offensive line allow him time. He's able to sit back there. Since week 5, I believe, let me look real quick. Since week 5, he's quarterback 5 on the year, averaging 20 points a game. So Bo Nix, they are giving this guy time to throw. He's able to make completions. He's 5th in air yards, so he's able to have time to throw downfield. And now they're saying, once again, this is another great matchup against the Colts for Bo Nix. Nix has been a solid fantasy option all season long. And in a week where every team is playing, he still remains a potential top 12 option, considering the advantage in the trenches and the overall matchup this week. When kept clean this season, Nix has delivered 82.4% of his total touchdown passes, the 4th highest mark among 34 quarterbacks with at least 200 dropbacks. Nick's turnover-worthy play rate, when kept clean, also sits at just 1.1%, a top 10 mark among quarterbacks. Nix has been able to deliver some fancy upside with his legs, as he's shown a willingness to scramble even when kept clean, ranking 2nd among quarterbacks and scrambled attempts, 18 with a clean pocket. The Colts are also allowing the 11th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position this season, making Nix a potential top 10 play again this week. So what PFF is saying here is that he's going to get time again against the Colts. The Colts allow the 11th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, and he's already kept clean most of the time. And even when he's upright, even when he's not getting pressure, he still scrambles. So we have a running quarterback. So we got a quarterback who rambles when he's pressured. We got a quarterback who scrambles when he's not pressured. And then when he actually has time, he likes to throw the ball deep. This is a good matchup for Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a hell of a player. He's probably going to be a league winner. As we see right now, he was probably picked up off your waiver wire, and he is quarterback 5 right now. And so, yeah, PFF says put him in your lineup so he can light up your fantasy points this week. And the second offensive line that we want to look into for week 15 is the Atlanta Falcons. Yes, the Atlanta Falcons versus the Las Vegas Raiders. The Falcons offensive line ranks middle of the pack in pass blocking grade this season at 72.0. Atlanta's advantage comes when facing the Raiders defensive line, which ranks 29th in pressure rate at 29.4% and 26th in pass rush grade at 61.4. Now, the Raiders have been on here a couple times this season. They don't get to the quarterback, except Matt Crosby. That dude's a fucking beast. We'll leave him alone. I don't want to talk to that guy. I don't want to touch him. I don't want him to look at him. I don't want him looking at me. I don't want him to get mad at me and come after me. But the rest of the line, they don't get to the quarterback. So Kirk Cousins, he has not been playing well, but he's still making Drake London a fantasy factor. Drake London is quarterback or wide receiver 8 on the season. And some quick stats for you for Drake London. He's 5th in targets, 8th in target share. His air yards is 11th overall. His receptions is 6th overall. Receiving yards, 9th overall. Total touchdowns, 12. Red zone targets, which is very important. He's 3rd overall in the league for wide receivers. So this guy's been doing what needs to be done to make sure that he stays in the top 10 for all those fantasy managers who drafted him 4 months ago, 5 months ago. And this week he's going up against Jack Jones, the cornerback for the Las Vegas Raiders, who allow 0.29 fantasy points per route run. This is another advantage for Drake London. So he's getting targeted by Kirk Cousins, who's not going to get pressured a lot in this game. And he's also got a sweet matchup against Jake Jones. London has been kept fairly quiet over the latter half of the fantasy regular season, ranking as just the PPR wide receiver 32 from weeks 8 through 14. While fantasy managers may be frustrated with the lower outputs from London during this stretch, especially when compared to with his first 7 games when he ranked as the PPR wide receiver 3 to start, but this week offers more optimism. On non-pressure dropbacks this season, London owns a 28.9% target rate, which leads all Falcons wide receivers and tight ends and ranks tied for 20th among 163 qualifying wide receivers and tight ends this season. In turn, London has delivered a 0.57 fantasy points per route run, that's 19th overall, and 166.1 fantasy points overall, third among the same qualifying players. The Raiders also ranked dead last in coverage grade as a team at 40, which puts London on the fringe of being a top 12 play again this week. London was also highlighted as a top start in this week's wide receiver man versus zone coverage report. That's also on PFF. So this is actually given fantasy managers, it should give fantasy managers some hope that he can actually do well, maybe get into the 20-point range, because this is a sweet matchup for him. He's got a quarterback who's going to be able to stay up, have clear sight, targets him already. He's going to get clean passes, and then he's also got a sweet matchup against Jake Jones. Feel comfortable putting this guy into your lineup to line up your fantasy points this week. All right, and now the third and final game that we want to target, and look, it's my beloved Cowboys. We finally did it. Something went right this year, and we actually made an offensive line that we want to target and focus on. Only took 15 weeks, but we're here. So the Dallas Cowboys offensive line versus Carolina Panthers defensive line. The Cowboys offensive line ranks 12th in run blocking grade, which ranks as the 12th best mark this season. I don't understand why it has it twice up there. Anyway, top 12, that's good. The Panthers defensive line ranks 31st in run defensive grade at 37.9 and is allowing 1.9 rushing yards before contact per attempt. That is tied for the worst mark in the league. So we're going to want to target the running backs for the Dallas Cowboys. Are we going to target Ezekiel Elliott? Hey, what's your name? Ezekiel. Hey, fuck you, Ezekiel. You're going on the bench. What about Dowdle Cook? That dude's cooked. I don't even know why they brought him on board. No, we're sticking to one player. And this player, let me look at it real quick here. Since week 9, he's been an RB1, getting 82 points. He's the 12th running back overall during that span. You know, we're talking about Rico Dowdle for the Cowboys. When given at least 1 rushing yard before contact per attempt, Dowdle is averaging 7 yards per carry, which ranks 11th among 27 qualifying running backs. Dowdle's 91.2 rushing grade in those situations also ranks 11th among the same qualifying running backs. Over the past 6 games since Cooper Rush has taken over for Dak Prescott, Dowdle is averaging 15.5 carries per game and 2.8 receptions per game, which is great opportunity for a running back. The Panthers are also allowing the most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs this season, giving Dowdle RB1 potential this week. So it looks like he's going to stay in the top 12 for running backs since week 9. First week of the playoffs, he's going up against the Panthers, and the Panthers allow 17 total touchdowns to running backs on the season. That's the most by any other team. So he has a great matchup. The offensive line is one of the best in run blocking, top 12. He's getting the opportunities. Going against Carolina, you start everybody against Carolina. This should be a safe person to put into your lineup to light up your fantasy points for this week. I'm putting him in my flex for my first round of the fantasy playoffs, and this is Tyler's play of the week for running backs. Yo, if you made it this far, and if you're enjoying the information I'm giving you about the offensive line report for week 15, then please hit the subscribe and press the like. It goes a long way. We have a goal to reach 2,000 subscribers before the season's over, and we're almost there. But we can't do it without you, and we appreciate all you zoners out there. Everything and anything goes a long way, and thank you for watching. And now let's look on the other side of the spectrum. Let's look at the players that you don't want to have in your lineup, that you want to avoid, that you want to ice out. And we're going to start with the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line versus the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line. The Steelers offensive line is generating just a 1.0 rushing yard before contact per attempt per game, which ranks 25th this season. The Eagles defensive line ranks just above average in run defensive grade at 12th and 17th in rushing yards allowed before contact per attempt. So it looks like we're going to go after the running backs on this one, that people that you want to avoid. I want to say Jaylen Warren, but yes, we're avoiding Jaylen Warren. This guy was actually my fantasy MVP that I tried to predict at the beginning of the season, but then in that preseason game, he pulled a hammy, and my life's never been the same since. Well, fuck that guy. So this one, we're actually going to talk about Najee Harris, who actually ranks 24th in points per game. So he's putting up running back 2 numbers, which is great for him. And he's put up a decent year this year. So the Steelers in general, their team run plays per game is 33.3. That's 2nd overall, which means he gets 223 carries, 17 carries a game. That's 5th overall. That's what you want as a running back too. He's not going to get you a lot of yards, but he's going to get you those opportunities. He's going to get you those goal line touches. And he's hard to bring down. So, when contacted 2 or fewer yards from the line of scrimmage, Harris averages just a 4 yards per carry. That's 38th among 50 qualifying running backs. Harris's first down plus touchdown rate of 10.9% in those situations ranks just 42nd among the same 51 qualifying running backs. Harris has been a solid fantasy option this season. Though in a week where we have options from all 32 teams, fantasy managers likely have some other options worth trusting over him. The Eagles allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs this season, making Harris closer to a fringe RB2, RB3 this week. So, as we see his points per game, that's kind of where he's been at for most of the season. So, just be wary. You're not going to get running back 1 numbers from him, and you're hoping for running back 2, but there's a good chance he's going to put up flex numbers this week, and that's not good for the fantasy playoffs. If you have better options, think about it. Philadelphia Eagles defense have been playing pretty good lately. If you have better options, try to avoid Najee Harris and ice him out of your lineups for the first week of the playoffs, week 15. Now, the second offense line that we want to focus on is the Cleveland Browns versus the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to make this one quick because PFF, they were saying to avoid Cedric Tillman. Well, I just found out Cedric Tillman is not even going to play. So, they have the whole notes here on Cedric Tillman. I'm not going to read that, but I'm going to read why that he was going to be a player that you want to avoid. The Browns' offensive line ranks 29th in pass blocking grade this season, 55.2. While allowing a 30.4% pressure rate. That's the 6th highest mark of the league. The Chiefs' defensive line ranks 6th in pass rush grade, that's 75.4, and 3rd in quick pressure rate at 27.1. So the Browns haven't been good at pass blocking, which is crazy because this year the Browns actually switch and they pass the ball a ton. I think they're top 5 in passing plays a game. And the Chiefs, they actually are great at getting to the quarterback. They're also one of the fastest to get to the quarterback. So their pass rush win rate is great. This could affect Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, he's still going to huck him, chuck him the football no matter what. But just think about it. There's players that this can impact. If Jameis Winston is going to be impacted, then that means it can impact Elijah Moore or Jared Jeudy. That's 2 players that you might want to avoid. But I'm telling you right now, if I had Jared Jeudy, I'm starting him either way. And the third and final game that we want to look into, well, we're not traveling far. We're going back to Pittsburgh. We're going to once again target the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line versus the Philadelphia Eagles. The Steelers offensive line ranks 24th in pass blocking grade, that's 61.9, and has allowed a 26.7% pressure rate, which is the 12th highest mark. The Eagles defensive line has generated a 37.3% pressure rate, that's 7th overall, a 25.3% quick pressure rate, that's 6th, and owns the second best pass rush grade on the year at 83.8. So the Steelers offensive line, they're not the best. And now they're going up against a very good Eagles defensive line that's going to get in the face of Russell Wilson. So this player that we're going to try to avoid, it looks like it'll be Pat Freiermuth. Now, just want to say, I had Pat Freiermuth earlier in the season. I drafted him, did well for a while. And then I started doing these PFF matchup reports, and 2 weeks in a row, they said to sit, to avoid, to ice out Pat Freiermuth from your lineup. So both those 2 weeks, he didn't do shit. So you know what I did? I dropped him and got Jonnu Smith. I win in that regard. But once again, they are saying that we need to avoid Pat Freiermuth. He's 21st in targets for tight ends, so he doesn't get targeted that much. But he is 4th in touchdowns, so he is very touchdown dependent. So when you're going to play him, you are hoping that he's going to score a touchdown. That's the only way he can salvage a game. Freiermuth has been a solid fantasy tight end in recent weeks. Though with every team playing and considering the matchup, Freiermuth likely falls back outside the top 15 for tight ends. George Pickens also has a chance to return this week, even though I do believe he's going to be out. As his absence helped Freiermuth's fantasy value last week and could again if he's out. On pressure dropbacks, Freiermuth owns just a 9% target rate, which ranks 125th among 162 qualifying wide receivers and tight ends. The Eagles also rank just 25th in fantasy points allowed to opposing tight ends, so it's a poor matchup in that regard as well for Freiermuth. So I guess really keep an eye on George Pickens. If George Pickens doesn't play, then maybe this guy can actually benefit from that because, they're going to have to throw the ball somewhere. Maybe he'll get some more targets, but if George Pickens is playing, I think you're going to try to want to avoid this guy. Ice him out of your lineups for this week, and maybe think of a streamer like Juwan Johnson, maybe. I don't know. This is just a tough matchup either way. All right, now I'm going to do my quick hits. I'm going to talk about a few games that you want to try to be involved in or you wanted to avoid. And the first game I want to talk about that you want to be involved in is the Green Bay Packers offensive line versus Seattle's defensive line. So Right here, PFF is saying that the Green Bay's offensive line, they're going to have they're in the advantage in the passing game by 29% according to PFF. They've only allowed 24% pressure rate. That is great. That is actually top 8 for offensive line, and it's only been converted into sacks 8% of the time. That is great. So they're keeping him upright. They're keeping Jordan Love upright, and he's not getting sacked. Seattle's defense of line, they do get to the quarterback a little bit above average of 32%, but it's converted to sacks only 12% of the time. That's pretty low. So they may get in the face of Jordan Love, but they're not going to sack him. So this is really going to be a battle of a really good pass blocking offensive line versus a defensive line's pass rush. It looks like there's a good chance that Jordan Love could actually have a good game because he is going to be standing upright in that pocket, not getting pressured, not getting sacked. But the problem is the wide receivers for the Packers, they have horrible matchups because the Seattle secondary has actually been playing well. The cornerback, Woolen, 0.22 fantasy points per route run. Cornerback, Josh Joby, 0.25 fantasy points per route run allowed, okay? And then cornerback Devin Witherspoon, 0.17 fantasy points per route run allowed. So and that's going to be going up against Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, and Jaden Reed. It's going to be a tough matchup for them, but, there's always that shot. If you give Jordan Love enough time in the pocket, I think he's like third in air yard attempts. He's going to try to go deep to either Jaden Reed or Christian Watson. And then another game that we're thinking about being a part of because of offensive line. I want to look at Detroit Lions offensive line versus the Buffalo Bills defensive line. The Detroit Lions, they earn a 1.56 yards before contact for their running backs. And the Buffalo Bills, they allow 1.38 yards before contact to running backs. That's actually higher than average, so that's not good for the Buffalo Bills. And for the Detroit Lions, 1.56 yards before contact, that's one of the highest in the league. So PFF is actually giving a rushing advantage to the Lions at 80%. That is huge. So who are we looking at here? We're looking at David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. Expect them to have a big game. It's at home in Detroit. You could run against Buffalo. That's what it says here. And then Detroit, they also run the ball 31 times inside the 5-yard line. So, once they get inside the 5-yard line, they're going to run the ball. Even if they don't succeed, they only succeed 45% of the time, they're going to keep going. I think that's one of the highest. 31 attempts inside the 5-yard line, that has to be one of the highest. And it will be a battle, though, because Buffalo Bills, they only allow a touchdown inside the 5-yard line with rushing 17% of the time. So that's really, we're going to see the battle of the trenches. But, oh, man, Detroit Lions, I think their offensive line is going to bully the Buffalo Bills. So, David Montgomery, play him. Jahmyr Gibbs, play him. Now, when I talk about games I want to avoid, one of the games, probably the game for passing, is going to be the Giants game against the Ravens. The Giants offensive line, they allow 32% pressure rate. That's the second worst in the league. And that's been converted into sacks 50% of the time. That's also maybe average, maybe a little bit above average. But the Baltimore Ravens pressure rate is 30%. That's above average. And that's converted into sacks 18%. That's above average. So their defensive line is going to overpower the Giants' offensive line when it comes to passing downs. PFF has given a disadvantage to the Giants in the passing game at negative 28%. So if there's certain players that you're trying to play, like Malik Neighbors, and while I'm looking at Malik Neighbors' matchup, he's going to be facing up against Nate Wiggins, who's allowed 0.18 fantasy points per route run earned. That is pretty damn good. So Malik Neighbors already has a tough matchup. He's got a backup quarterback. He's going up against his quarterback. His offensive line is going up against one of the best defensive lines against a pass rush or for a pass rush. So I know if you got Malik Neighbors, you want to play him. I'm actually going up against him this week, and I'm not afraid. I am not afraid about it. Now, the last game I want to talk about, the last game I want to avoid is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line versus the Los Angeles Chargers defensive line. And in the running game, PFF has already given Tampa Bay Buccaneers a negative 26% disadvantage in this game in the trenches. Tampa Bay is they've earned 1.40 yards before contact. That's about average, so it's not bad. But the Los Angeles Chargers, they are giving up 1.13 yards before contact. That's pretty damn good. And then the Buccaneers, when they get inside the 5-yard line, they get worse. They're not the best at the goal line. Out of 23 attempts, they've converted into touchdowns 35% of the time. That is real low. While the Chargers only allowed 9 rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line, and it's only been converted into a touchdown, it looks like once, 33% of the time. So they've only allowed 1 rushing touchdown inside the 5. I know Bucky Irving's probably not going to play. Rachaad White is going to play. He's not a very good runner. He's having a better year this year, but still the metrics will show he's not the best runner. I don't know if it's going to be him at the goal line. It's going to be Sean Tucker at the goal line. Rachaad White should get receptions, but I do not expect a big game out of Rachaad White just because of the matchup here. Now that's a wrap for the offensive line report for Week 15. Now you know which 3 players to target, and now you know which 3 players to avoid. Plus you have more information about additional games that you want to be a part of or stay away from. Every Friday night, Tyler and I do a live ranking show and answer questions from the chat. If you want to know where your players landed in our rankings, if they ranked high, if they ranked low, click this video right here, okay? And I'll talk to you in that video. Deuces.